bullying, tricks, and humiliation. That's what Michael Wirth endured when he was stopped by a police officer on Halloween night. Michael, he's a normal guy, and he wanted to spend Halloween with his wife, and they went out for the evening. Now, he was dressed like a clown. He had a big hair, big pants, big shoes, and they're ready to have some fun. Now, that evening, Michael's wife had a little bit more to drink than they had originally anticipated. And Michael knew it was going to be up to him later in the evening to drive home. So he did what any responsible person would do. He moderated his drinking. Drank a couple of beers, then he switched to Diet Mountain Dew. And when it was time to go home, they were stopped by a police officer. Now, when that officer testifies later in this trial, you're not going to hear him say that Michael was speeding. You're not going to hear him say that Michael ran a red light. You're not going to hear him say that Michael was violating any traffic law. All you're going to hear is Michael crossed one of the lines on the road. Well, after the officer stopped Michael, he made him get out of the car, and he was trying to get Michael to confess. He wanted to stop over with. He wanted to take Michael to jail. Now, I said in the beginning that Michael was bullied, and the evidence is going to show that. You're going to hear how the officer administered field sobriety tests. And we talked about the costume that Michael was wearing. So the officer made Michael go up a hill and get on a sidewalk that was cracked and uneven. Now, you're going to hear a lot about field sobriety tests today. And some of the field sobriety tests are proven, if administered correctly, that they can indicate if someone's intoxicated. And one of those tests is the balancing test. This sidewalk wasn't. As you're going to hear today, and you're going to see in the photographs, wasn't even. It was cracked, broken, uneven. And to top it off, Michael, he was in costume. He had those big clown shoes on. The officer made him do it anyway. And Michael, he knew he couldn't do it, and he stopped. The officer continued to administer tests, some that aren't even approved, or some that haven't been proven to be effective in showing if someone's intoxicated. Well, after that point, the officer decides to interrogate Michael. And you're going to hear him testify that he wanted to trick him. That's going to be his own words. He's going to tell you, I wanted to trick him into doing a confession. And members of the jury, remember I told you about humiliating Michael. And that's what he did. He made him climb up a hill in those big clown shoes. He fell. Never told him to take the clown shoes off. Kept him up there while traffic and cars passed by. He did tests, he did interrogation, all in an effort to get him to confess. And as you're going to hear today, he failed. Pa-bump, pa-bump, pa-bump. My heart is racing. It sounds like the beat of a drum in my head. I'm not this guy. I'm not the guy who's standing on the top of a hill next to a police officer in a clown outfit. I'm a normal guy. I've lived here my entire life. It's where I got married. It's where I work. This isn't me. I'm so frustrated, confused. I've been bullied. I've been tricked. And I am humiliated. Officer Fern, he just keeps pushing me. A new hoop he wants me to jump through. I can't take it anymore. I'm not going to do it. I refuse. Michael Wirth was stopped on Halloween weekend by an officer who assumed he was guilty from the moment he laid eyes on him. Michael Wirth was bullied, he was tricked, and he was humiliated. Now, Officer Fern has spent this entire trial making a joke out of Michael Wirth. With his investigation, there's no laughing matter about it. You know, we heard a lot today about field sobriety tests, about stops, about police procedure. And you heard the testimony. And let's start from the beginning. Let's put it into perspective. When Officer Fern saw Michael's vehicle for the first time, you heard him testify. He wasn't speeding. He didn't run a red light. He didn't run a stop sign. He didn't fail to indicate a turn signal. No. Officer Fern told you, Michael didn't violate a single traffic law. No. Rather, he stopped him because he crossed the yellow and white line on a narrow, curvy road at night. That's why I stopped him. And then what did Michael do when he saw those lights flashing in his rearview mirror? He pulled over safely on the side of the road. And again, when Officer Fern demanded he exit the vehicle, well, remember in trial today we saw this picture. These are the clown shoes that Michael was wearing. Even with these clown shoes on, these shoes are 3 or 4 times the size of normal shoes. Imagine how much they weigh. Even with these shoes on, he was able to get out of his vehicle, not use it for support, and stay steady on his feet. You see, members of the jury, it was Halloween weekend. Officer Fern told you, he said, there's lots of drunks out on Halloween weekend. He wanted to make his mark. He wanted to arrest Michael so he could get back on the road and pull someone else over. Continue. And we know that Officer Fern wasn't being honest, that he just wanted to get it over with. Remember what he said? When Michael exited the vehicle, I observed that his face was flushed. Well, we know he wasn't being truthful. We know he was being dishonest. You heard every single witness today testify that Michael had caked on white makeup on his face. He couldn't tell that he was flushed. He didn't know. But that's the standard language. The language that Officer Fern will put in any DUI paperwork because that's what he needs to say to make sure someone gets arrested. It wasn't about guilt or innocence. He had already assumed. Now, we talked about the location. There was a hill. And Michael, he was in those big clown shoes. And Officer Fern made him climb up that hill with those shoes on, and he fell. Well, to a normal person, you'd help the guy up. No, Officer Fern didn't offer to help him up. That was in there checking the box for intoxication. He didn't care that he was wearing clown shoes. It was a joke. That gets to the top of the hill, and we saw pictures, and we heard testimony of what it looked like at the time. This sidewalk is broken. It's uneven. It's grass growing through the cracks. Now, we talked a lot today about field sobriety tests, and you heard that Officer Fern administered 3 field sobriety tests to Michael. The one-legged stand, counting backwards, and counting your fingers. You also heard in the testimony that out of those 3 tests, only 1 is standardized. Only 1 was taught to Officer Fern at the academy. Only 1 has any indication of intoxication. That's the one-legged stand. Now, we also heard that there's criteria for administering the one-legged stand. It requires a flat, hard surface. Also, if someone is wearing shoes that interferes with the results of the test or would interfere with the result of the test, the officer is supposed to instruct the person to take the shoes off. Well, you saw the sign. It was broken, uneven, and Officer Fern, he had Michael keep his clown shoes on. So Michael was forced to take a test on uneven ground in clown shoes, 3 to 4 times the size of normal shoes. And he tried. He tried to pass the test. He put his leg up and he tried to do what he needed to do, but he couldn't. He knew he couldn't. He knew it would be impossible for anybody. And he stopped. Officer Fern persisted. He made him count backwards. He made him count his fingers. Members of the jury, these aren't standard tests. These tests don't have any scientific proof that they indicate intoxication. Officer Fern said so himself. Officer Fern, when I asked him, why do you administer tests? Where did you learn them from? He was like, well, I had a supervisor who taught me about them. And my personal experience, they're good indicators. My personal experience. That's not good enough, members of the jury. That's not good enough. Officer Fern continues. He begins his interrogation. And this just so strikingly is unjust what he says next. Could you believe it? He took the stand and he admitted that his goal during the interrogation was to trick him into confessing. To trick him. So his goal wasn't protecting the public. His goal wasn't getting the truth. His goal wasn't justice. It was to trick the person into confessing. That would be the goal of someone who assumed you were guilty from the beginning. So Michael, he was standing up there on top of that hill. It's his neighborhood. He was just a few blocks away from home. His neighbors could see the flashing lights. You know when there's a cop in front of your house, you see the lights coming through your window, those flashing lights. Standing up there, going through every hoop Officer Fern asked. He just was bullied. He was just tricked. Think about how humiliating that is. His wife is down there at the bottom of the hill looking up at him. How frustrated he had to be. How he knew that no matter what he did, no matter what he said, no matter how many hoops he jumped through, Officer Fern was still going to arrest him. So he exercised his rights. He said, no, I'm not going to do anymore. I refuse. We are a country of rules and laws. And Officer Fern, he doesn't play by the rules. One of the most precious rights, one of the most precious laws we have is the presumption of innocence. You know what that means? That means before the government can rip you from your family, before the government can take your liberty away, they have to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that you are guilty. Officer Fern, he didn't afford that right to Michael. Now, today the government had the burden of proof. They had to prove to you beyond a reasonable doubt that Michael was guilty of the two charges they brought. What was the first charge? It was reckless driving. And what evidence did they present to support that? Only one piece. Only one thing. The fact that Michael, on a narrow, curvy road at night, crossed the yellow and white line. Thousands of people do that every day for innocent reasons. That's not reckless driving. That's ridiculous. And the second charge is DUI. And what evidence do they have of that? Well, we know the tests are out. The tests were invalid or just part of Officer Fern's imagination. They don't count. They're not evidence that he's guilty of a DUI. No, it's the refusal. They're going to stand up here and talk to you until they're blue in the face about the refusal. But you know exactly why he refused. You know exactly how frustrated he is, or he was. Members of the jury, he was bullied, tricked, and humiliated. He was stopped by an officer who presumed he was guilty from the moment he laid eyes on him. And I'm asking you to correct that injustice. Find him not guilty. Thank you.